First of all, Nick, thank you for coming on here. It's a pleasure. This is
Yeah,
our first
yeah.
time doing this, so it's awesome to have you on here. We
I
really
appreciate it, guys.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm always wanting to do stuff like this and be able to talk with my situation and everything like that. Anything, talking shop is one of the things I love doing, especially with kind of the next generation of guys. So it's definitely my pleasure to be able to do this with you guys.
Yeah. So, just first of all, like, how's it going? Like, how's your training going? How's throwing going? I know you're just kind of getting back into the swing of things. How's it feeling?
Yeah, so yeah, it's been some time since I have competed. It's now been over a year, which is kind of crazy to think. But the last time I competed was Drake Relays last year. They just had Drake Relays this year, so it's been officially a year. I have been throwing for like the last, I'd say maybe 2 months or so now. I started, yeah, probably 2 months now because I started when there was 6 months left till my suspension ends. So I've been doing, yeah, I'd say maybe 8 or 9 weeks now, and I'm officially back into full movement. I'm doing static non-reverses right now, so training is actually better than I thought it would be up to this point. The last year or so, I've been training really hard outside of throwing to get my body into a particular shape that I wanted to be in athletically for any sort of particular endeavor that I do, but especially throwing. So I feel really good, and I think that's why it's correlating really well to throwing. So throwing is going good, I would say right now. I think it's a perfect word for it. It's going good. So yeah, I'm looking forward to things moving forward over the summer and everything.
That's awesome. So like so we saw you did like an NFL Pro Day kind of thing at Nebraska. How did that go? We saw like it was had some complications there. And like a follow
Yeah.
up question to that, if you had the chance, would you go to the NFL full time?
Okay, so let me answer this in consecutive questions here, the way
Okay.
you gave them the thing. First and foremost, yes, I did do the. I shouldn't even say I did. So I was invited to the NFL Pro Day at Nebraska, and I can honestly say it was very botched on their end. So long story short, because I kind of had mentioned this I did a live and mentioned everything about this, but the only way you get invited to an NFL Pro Day is if you have at least one NFL scout that is interested in you or watching you work out.
Hmm.
So what the universities usually do is they give you basically an NFL free agency sort of documentation or a document, I'm sorry, that you have to fill out with all of your measurables and things that you've done, like accomplishments and such. So I filled out a file for my prospective NFL career, and essentially they gave it out to the NFL scouts that were coming to the Nebraska Pro Day. And from what I was told, I had multiple NFL scouts that were interested. So I was invited to the Nebraska Pro Day, and when I got there, there was a lot of different complications, and it was ran extremely poorly. So when it ended up getting to my group's turn, because there was a UNL group and my group, which was me, previous professionals, like other Division I football players, like guys from Vanderbilt, UCLA,
Hmm.
UNI, UNL, or NIU. I'm sorry, stuff like that. So when it got to our group, the NFL scouts had to move on to the next one, so we only got to run the 40. So it was really, really unfortunate. And I don't even know what I ran in the 40. They didn't even give me my time. And unfortunately, too, they gave me my NFL scouting report from the pro day, and it doesn't even have my measurables right. It has me at 5'7" and 240 pounds. So I don't know who that's for, but that's not me. So I weighed in at 289, I believe, and I was 6 feet tall. So I don't I don't know who
Yeah.
that file was for, but that's not mine. So it doesn't have anybody's 40 times or anything like that on there. So it was really, really unfortunate. They did screw us big time on that. You
Yeah.
don't I've talked to my agent many times about it. My agent used to represent, I'm sorry, other NFL players back in the day, and he told me he's never heard of that, especially with other throwers that have been invited to pro days in the past. Normally, you get an entire pro day that you can do, like Roger Stona over at Arkansas. You got to do the full pro day, so it was quite disheartening. I have been trying to get in contact with other agents who were football agents because I would still like to pursue at some point football again. So to answer your second question, yes, I would love to. If I had the opportunity to at least try out, I'd love to do it. I think I have tangibles that would be very good for an NFL team to play football again, especially my strength and my speed. So I would love to be able to have the opportunity to do so, but that's going to be ultimately something through, of course, political and logistical manners that are out of my control a little bit, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to have some sort of opportunity, but we'll see in the future for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh, Parker, you want to go?
That's it. Following on that, just like strength and speed, like not trying to glaze or anything, but you are one of the strongest current throwers at the moment. Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think is your key to being able to throwing further to build on that strength that you have that just outperforms other people?
Yeah, and I'm not tooting my own horn or nothing like that, but I would say I'm probably, if not the second, I'd say maybe the
Yeah,
third strongest
sure.
thrower overall in the world. When it comes to overall lifting and things, but I tell a lot of people this when it comes to throwing, particularly, right? It's great to be really strong, but if you can't apply it to the ball, it doesn't really matter, right? So I could squat 1,000 pounds, but if I throw 17 meters, I can't be a professional, right? So I've got to be able to do that, which kind of relates to my Italian teammates, Leonardo Fabri, who's now a silver medalist at the World Championships, and Zane Weir, who's also a European champion. Those guys, are, like, they don't even have half the strength numbers that I do, but they have incredible PRs and they're incredible throwers. So really, when it comes down to throwing, for like my strength and relating to throwing, you have to be really strong specifically, right? So I've got to be really strong in the ring, really strong, and make it applicable to throwing any sort of stone that I throw, no matter what weight it is, really, really far. So one of my keys, or my goals, I should say, in my training right now is to try to get everything to sort of line up to make the change from, I would say I kind of now I split it up almost now, like my past career, now my future career with the suspension in the middle. But my past career, I got to a point where I was just trying to go, go, go. I was trying to really, really just scream through the ring and hammer the hell out of it, which worked, right? To a particular degree, it worked really well. But for me, I'm trying now to take a little bit more of a methodical approach, and it's kind of more of a chess game where it's a long-term approach where I'm trying to get to a point where I can use the giant reservoir of strength that I've gained and be able to get to a point where I'm also a master in the ring and line those up so that it goes really, really far. So I've taken a step back in this time to reflect during my suspension, and really have been kind of changing the paradigm in that regard. So for me, that's what I'm like. That's what my sights are set on when it comes to my aspirations to come or coming back into professional throwing at the end of the summer.
Oh, absolutely.
Now,
Thank you.
as you mentioned, your teammates being Zane Weir and Leonardo Fabri,
Yeah,
what is it like throwing for a nation that you don't live in currently?
yeah. So that's a question I get a lot. So anybody who knows me personally, like if I grew up with them or if they know me in a friendly manner, like in my personal life, they know how Italian I am, right? So I grew up in an extremely thick Italian culture in my family. Like it's a part of who we are. So both sides of my family came over on the boat, and it was something that was a wish from my grandfather on my father's side. He wanted somebody in the family to because he had citizenship. He wanted somebody else in the family to have citizenship and to do something really cool like that to compete for our country and to bring pride to our family name. So when I was growing up and becoming a good athlete, it had been something that had been on my mind once I entered college to be a collegiate thrower. So when I got the opportunity to do so, when they reached out to my agent in 2020, I jumped on the chance right away because for me, it's something that wasn't. Sometimes when you think about like, oh, I'm an Italian American, right? So I was born here and I speak fluent English and everything like that. I only speak a little bit of Italian, but when I look at it, it wasn't super far fetched because for me, I felt like I fit into the team right away. So for me, it was, to go and throw for Italy brought me such great pride, and it's something that I am really proud of overall, especially to have gone to the Olympics and to, now have my citizenship that my family can have completely, and my future family as well. So it's something that, like, I don't think it's, I know some other folks that have done that and they've really reached, grasped for straws to try to get citizenship somewhere else. But for me, like I said, it's kind of who I am through and through. It's in the fiber of my being to be Italian. So, like I said, overall, it was quite a quick transition. Like I said, I felt like I kind of fell right in line with the team, and they embraced me really well. And I know that even people that are on the national team have been quite disappointed with the way that I've been treated, especially at this time with my unlawful suspension. Definitely.
Now, being Italian, like prior to like meats and stuff, do you like eat Italian food before you compete?
Yeah. This is a granted question. It's not like it's a bad question or anything like that. Yeah, it's not necessarily. No, it's one of those things where I think people think that, like, every time we go to meets, it's like, oh, we've got to travel with Parmigiano Reggiano and stuff like that. But no. When we go to meets, we all eat the same way. So we're all high level athletes, right? So when we're
Yeah.
going places, usually it's fish or red meat or chicken and rice and vegetables. Like, it's not like we go places and, like, oh, I need to have some sort of pasta with something like that. No, it's not always like that. But we do, like, when I'm in Italy, like, if I go to Italian meats, of course the cuisine there is different, right? So I'll go to a meat and be fed until I'm stuffed, because usually it's like an 8-course meal and it's all of Italian food. So really what you have to do as a professional is you have to be able to kind of like pick and choose and know what works for you. Because in my early career, I wasn't like that. In my early career, I was so fascinated with the different cuisines everywhere. So I was just kind of like, anytime I went anywhere, especially Italy, I'd eat till, like I said, it was coming out my gills. So it's one of those things where when we go places, you'll see, like, even the Italian team, we're all kind of eating healthy in particular ways, not just pasta all the time. So no.
So I asked something about that. What is your absolute favorite food from Italy?
From like in the sense of any cuisine that I've had ever that's Italian, or just from
anything you could possibly think of that you've had that you felt like I could eat this a million more times.
Oh man, that's honestly, this is an Italian American thing, but one of my favorite dishes usually when I go to like authentic Italian places, I could say, like, even in the Northeast, in my authentic Italian, I still mean like they came from Italy, but they do a bit of a Italian American thing, is rigatoni alla vodka or penne alla vodka. But I grew up on cavatelli and broccoli rabe, which is what my father made. And so those two dishes, probably a toss up between those two. Just because those two dishes to me are super nostalgic. Like I said, grew up on both of them. So I would say both of those particularly are, and that's an answer I've given for years, because I've gotten that question for years and years. But I would say both of those. Like, if you gave me like one dish to live on for the rest of my life, it'd be one of those.
So, kind of going back to what you mentioned with the strength and getting technique to all line up in one, moving forward, like considering like how long you have left in your career, what is your like major goal for your career? Like, is it longevity? Is it far distance? What is the overall goal for the rest of your career going forward?
So mainly for the rest of my career, what I would say is what I'm really trying to do is to get back up into that upper echelon and get into a position where I'm able to be who I was once again on a long-term basis. That's the only way you can have a long-term career, right? Is to be in the thick of it, to be a top 10 world ranked shot putter in the world. The only way for you to make a substantial living and be a true professional in my eyes is to do that, right? So for me, that's a multifold thing, right? So it's about staying healthy, right? Still staying at the top of my game strength wise, still being able to function as an athlete, pick and choose my travel, right? So to do things that are important, do things that you can to propel myself up back into that world ranking that's going to be high enough. So all of those things are what I'm looking at, especially towards the end of the summer, because I'm only going to have about a month and a half in the summertime to be able to compete for this year. There's a ton of opportunities to do so, but once I start, I've got to hit the ground running.
Right.
But long term, I'd love to be able to have a long career. A guy like Joe is a perfect example, right? Joe, I forget how old he is in particular, but Joe doesn't seem to have any sort of thought of slowing down anytime soon, right? So that'd be great. But in reality, the window of being a professional, any athlete, right? So in any endeavor is very, very low. It's a very short window. So for me, I felt like I've already they say on average it's like 3 years whenever you do is any sort of particular sport at a professional level. So I've already doubled that, right? This would be my 6th year as a professional. But I would love to continue to try to hit the decade mark. That'd be great. And there's a lot of things that go into that as well. But the only way I'm going to be able to do that is to be able to get back to who I was, right? So if I can get it back into the top 10 world rank, increase my PR over 22 meters, and be one of those guys again on the circuit, that would allow me to continue to do this for a long period of time. It's a lot like my buddy Peyton, who now is kicking butt. He had hip labrum surgery, and he took a bit of a dive in that. I believe that was 2022. That 2022 year, he really kind of took a turn for the worse, and he really got everything situated and figured out what the problem was, attacked it, and now he's world ranked, I think, 3 now. So something like that would be something that I would love to be able to do, right? Just get back to not only being the guy that everybody loves to see at meets, but also to be a really high level athlete as well, too. So giving back to the sport and being able to make people laugh and smile and stuff is great, but you got to be able to be a great athlete on top of that too.
I say,
Yeah.
following up on just kind of mentioning these other super talented throwers, like, a lot of people say that we're in a golden age of throwing right now where you're at a worldwide competition in shot, and if you're not over 22-20, you're not placing. Like, how has that excessive competition impacted your mindset on your training? Where, like, are you more defeated saying, oh, I'm only at over 21, which is typically outstanding, but nowadays, it can only get you so far?
Yeah, 21 used to be the old 22. If you threw 22 back in the day, it was like, oh my gosh, there was like maybe one guy in the world that threw 22, and now you've got essentially almost 10 guys now throwing 22. It's insane. But the mindset that a lot of professionals like myself have is that I look at it where it's a me versus me sort of mentality, right? So I don't necessarily look at those guys, what they're doing. Like I said, like my buddy Peyton or Ryan or Joe, or even the 2 guys I compete with in Italy, Zane and Leo. I don't look at what they're doing and say, if I'm not doing that, right? Like if I don't beat them every single time I see them, or if I don't do that every single day, that it's over. It's like a defeatist mentality, right? I look at it essentially like I know how to get there. So if I take the right steps, I'll be there, right? So and especially with the guys that are closer to me on the circuit, I want to see them do well because it's also really good for me too. I find that I do a really, or I do better, I should say, when I have to try to, propel myself up to that level. I think it's incredible that we live in a time like this. I think if it was not this way, all of the performances would be down. I think the fact that we're chasing 2350 Ryan Krauser is the reason why everybody's throwing 22. If Ryan Krauser was the world record holder with 2220, you'd still see 2100 being a ginormous throw. But we're all chasing that peak, and I think that's why, and because the peak is still, I'm sorry, continuing to grow, that's why the bottom end is growing so exponentially. So for me, I think that it's a really good thing, and I think it's something that's helped me, right? Because it also helps me jump into it really quickly too. Helps me jump back to who I was, and knowing I have to get to a certain point proficiently, right, to be able to be competitive. So it's been really, really good that way. I don't look at it as a negativity. I've said that since my first year in 2018. I think that's a really great thing that we're all like doing really well. I think the performances would not be bred the same way if we weren't.
So going back to the kind of mentality, I know this might be a sore subject, and you don't really have to answer this if you don't want to.
There's no
But
sort of subject for me.
yeah.
I'm an open book. I can talk about anything.
So going back to your unlawful suspension,
Yeah.
when that happened, were there any mental roadblocks that you had to go through, like not being able to compete and having to be, almost stuck doing the same thing over and over again without any like competitions or being able to compete against anybody? Were there any mental roadblocks that you had to push through in order to keep going and keep having the drive that you have?
Yeah. So there was a long period of time, like I would say probably at least 6 months or so where it was really, really difficult. And it wasn't just the suspension. There was a lot of things in my life that kind of just fell through. Um, I felt like I was at a point where I had lost everything um, extrinsically, I would say. So like things that were like outside, like not intrinsically, of course, like my health and everything was fine, luckily, but everything outside of myself I lost. I lost where I was training at. I lost um, my potential coach and training partners. I had lost my career. I had lost people who were close to me, people that I thought would never leave, and you know things that people that I thought were in my corner, right? And so it made it a really, really dark time. It was a very kind of dark time for me, but there was always kind of a saying that I always kind of look back on. And it's like, you know, you could either cry in the storm or you could dance in the rain. And to me, I felt like it was one of those things where I just got to a point where I thought, man, let me just lean into me. You know, there's something special within myself, and I think that a lot of people have that they never get to tap into, like Pandora's box, because they never tap into their full potential and find who that is, right? Find who they are. But for me, I felt like I've gotten to a point where I know who that is. It's just time for me to, you know, finally get in there again. And so leaned into myself, like I had mentioned, and completely changed my body composition and did all these things that I wanted to do that I couldn't do when I was, you know, a constant professional, right? So when I was throwing on the circuit all the time, I had to do certain things to stay competitive. And now there were things that I thought would help that I got to experiment, or I thought would help my career, I should say, that I got to do and got to experiment with, and I think ultimately will help me in the long term. So I think that there's sometimes when I look at it and I go, maybe that was for a reason, right? I'm also a man of faith, and I think that maybe there was a reason as to why I had all of that negativity all at once, right? To test my faith, to test who I was as a man, to test who I was as an athlete, and everything. It was kind of all of it, right? So to me, I think that when you look at it, right, when you're in the eye of the storm, you could either use it, right, and make yourself a better man, better athlete, better overall person, human being overall, or you can let it kill you, right? You may let it bury you, and you could let that be the end of it, right? I could have easily just sat on my couch, you know, sulked in my tears and ate myself into oblivion and got to a point where I was nothing anymore and believed it. Or I could have gotten to a point where I go, you know what? When it's time for me to come back, I'll shove it up everybody's, you know what? You know what I mean? So that's the way I chose to take it. And I chose to use it to propel me to where I want to go.
Do you feel
Still
like that
very,
was your
still incredibly unlawful though.
yeah? Do you feel
Yeah.
like that was your absolute all-time low compared throughout your whole life? Like, is that where your point is? And can you look back on that now and be like, it wasn't as bad as it could have been, and that there's still always, good moments in those bad times.
Yeah, I would say that it probably was inherently. I'd probably say it was probably at this point in my life, probably the lowest I had ever been for a lot of different reasons, but definitely, you know, the career aspect of it being taken away from me was extremely tough. You know, you get an identity almost, right? So it gets to a point where, you know, people know me as a human, but a lot of people know me as Chubby Diamonds, right? Everybody kind of knows me as the happy-go-lucky guy who's out there kind of acting like a goofball and throwing very well on top of it too. So you get to a point where you get sort of an identity. So you kind of get to a point where you're like, man, I've lost that, right? When they take it away from you. So you don't really know what to do with yourself a lot of the time. But as you had just mentioned, right? I could have allowed that to just be like, oh my gosh, that's the end of my identity. I don't know who I am. Let's just kind of, you know, let it be the end all be all. Or I could use it and be like, well, let's find positives in it. So I decided to try to find positives. It took me a long time to do so. But I also used the negativity in that like sort of dark time, right? To get to a point where it allowed me to completely change myself in a lot of different realms, I'd say physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, a lot of different ways. So I don't look at it completely negatively like this entire time, but I'd say about 85% of it was really negative for sure. Yeah, and there's and by no means am I like completely out of it. Like, oh yeah, who cares? Like, I still very much care about a lot of that stuff that happened. in that year, or in this past year, I should say. But in this life, you can't dwell on it. Like I just mentioned earlier with that saying, you've got to kind of put one foot in front of the other, and take steps forward to get to where you want to go. Because if you stay in still, if you kind of get stuck in quicksand, you'll never get to where you're trying to go.
Yeah, I agree. And there was a pretty big backlash for some people that just did not understand the situation, and I'd see it all the time in your comments, and even in our comments when we posted that one video. Like, it was like, I mean, just pay attention, see what's going on, see the
Yeah,
problem,
yeah,
and
yeah,
people just ignored it. And I feel like some athletes, some sports watchers, they're just ignorant and they want to see people fail. And
yeah,
seeing you come up out of it, even now with the weight you've lost, you're coming right back into the sport. People, the real people that have watched you, that still follow you, that still love your throwing and love the goofiness and everything, they're still on your side. You know, it's definitely a big thing now, and it's going to divide the sport into who's real and who's not. And I like it.
yeah. And I completely agree. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people, and it's not just in my regard, in a lot of different things, right? Like just in life in general, they just look at everything so superficially, right? Like they skim the top. They don't look at it like for what it is. So I still get people who message me about, like, how could you miss testing, or how could you have taken drugs, and like all these things that just aren't true because of all this defamation, and wrongful sort of, not only termination, but like wrongful information that's being put out there. It's almost made me have a target on my back, in the sense of people looking at me like, oh, now he's just all of a sudden a tarnished athlete. And it's just not true. Like, all of it is just untrue. Anybody who really knows me, I mean, I live with Peyton Otterdahl. Like, do you think he would just be okay with seeing me take drugs every single day? Like, no. We both get drug tested in our home all the time. There has never been one time where, like, he's been gone and I'm here and somebody showed up and he didn't take a test. There's never been a time where he was here and I was gone and I didn't take a test. It's all lies. It's the entirety of my suspension. I truly just don't understand, because I know the truth. But most people don't know the truth, and they just go, "Oh, see, Nick Ponzio's just that big, strong guy, and we knew he was taking drugs the whole time, and now he's just got popped for it." And it's just not true, like, at all. I told you guys this before, and people have clowned on me for this, right? Like I told you, like, I'm a man of faith, and they go, "Oh, you use the God card because it just makes you look like you're innocent." It's just, no. Like, if I'm truly a man of faith, I wouldn't use that card, because, first of all, that's not being a man of faith, to lie consistently to try to propel myself into a better career, right? And it also just looks terrible to do that. So I would never really do that. The only reason why I ever say that is because that's the truth. That the truth is all I care about, and like I mentioned earlier, I don't really understand the entirety of the suspension. I was drug tested during my quote unquote whereabouts period, that they couldn't, or that they said that I didn't update my app. So even if I did update my app, they would have still did exactly what happened. They would have drug tested me. How does drug testing in that time not exonerate you, right? I don't understand why we're at a point now where we are legitimately more concerned with an application and your GPS location, or your an application and your specific location in the world, over getting actually drug tested, right? So the only way I was actually drug tested because people knew where I was, and they've admitted they knew where I was. So what's the point here? I don't really get what we're doing, right? Why take the Olympics away from me just because, right? Just because you want to look like you're doing your job when clearly you're not. Clearly, when you're letting 23 Chinese swimmers continue to compete at the Tokyo Olympics, even though they failed, and continue to win medals, right? Like, you're not doing your job. You're letting an innocent, clean athlete have to sit out for 18 months, which is the appeal that they gave me, 18 months for nothing. For I told this to everybody. If I missed testing, if I failed testing, if I wasn't compliant, like I said, no, I'm not doing it, or anything like that, I'd be like, with what happened, I'd be like, I can't even fight it. But it's just like, I don't, like, I'm confused. Like, I don't really get it, right? Like, I've done nothing wrong. I've taken hundreds of tests. All of them I've passed. Like, I don't know why I'm sitting at home and everybody's getting to compete. and I'm a like clean athlete. Like I'm getting tested right now during my suspension too. Like I don't know. I'm confused. The whole thing is extremely. It's just wrong. Like it to me, it's really tarnished the sport as a whole to me because it's like it's not even legitimate now, right? Like I mean, like even Ryan Krauser's gotten strikes for this exact same thing, and he said the same thing. He's like, I don't really get what we're doing here. Like I get drug tested so often. I even if like let's say I wasn't drug tested for 2 weeks, right? Like I couldn't take drugs between one drug test and then 2 weeks later take another one and not have it show up. So like, well, I don't really understand what we're doing.
Yeah, I absolutely. It's yeah, absolutely. I agree. But
It's
on a
it's
mo-
just it's just and like I said, I'm not trying to give the woe is me card like everybody's support, but it's just we're at a point now where it's like 18, like you're making me miss a second Olympics. When I got the initially when it came out that they were going to give me 2 years, and then I fought it and they gave me a year, and I thought, oh, I'll be able to come back and still have a season and then do the Olympics. I thought, it's still shitty that I missed, Budapest, but I'll be able to still do Paris. And then they were like, no, 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 we're going to appeal it and take everything from you, including the Olympics specifically, just because we don't want you to go for nothing. To me, I was like, okay, now you're just doing this personally now. Do you just not like the fact that I like to kind of do my little song and dance before the meet, or what's going on here? You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. On a more positive note, what is your perspective or opinion on all these up and coming younger throwers? Looking at Nicholas Alekna, Jackson Cantwell, Tariko Hagan, all of these crazy talented throwers for their age groups. And, like, do you think that we're going to be seeing more records broken in the coming 5-10 years?
Yeah, I think it's incredible. I think all that stuff's incredible, right? Like there is a lot to be said about I'm just going to touch on this real quickly, right? There's a lot to be said about wind helping some of these throwers, right? Like, do I think that Mikola Selekna only threw 74 or will only throw 74 in his career just because of wind? No. I think Mikola Selekna will continue to grow and will probably get to a point where he's going to throw 72 meters in a stadium, which is insane. But I do think that there's something to be said when guys are PRing by a lot because of wind. I saw a particular athlete, and I'll just say it because it's no slight to her, right? Like I watched Urinda Van Klinken in 2021 go from a 62-meter PR to a 70-meter PR strictly because of the U of A wind, and she knows it. Everybody else knows it from that place, or that was at that meet, I should say. There is something to be said about that. So I think the notion that's like no, no, it doesn't help at all is just wrong, right? But overall, right, that Nicholas doing that at what is he, 22 or something like that, just shows that this next generation is it's going to be insane. Like I think for the most part, almost all of the records will um probably be erased and reset. I think the only one that won't will be women's shot put because that's just insane. It's 2262 or something, which I love Chase Ely to death. I do, but to throw 2262 would just be just enormous. I mean, like I've seen Valerie Adams throw into the high 20s, and I've seen Chase do that and stuff, and even those throws are just disgustingly far. So to think that you're going to do another 2 meters onto that is insanity, right? So that's the only one I would say that would probably stick around. But everything, I mean, like you look at even Ethan Katzberg, who I know. I mean, 84 high to start the season is insanity. This next generation is like I thought that my generation coming through, like I told you, like me and Peyton and some of these other guys, some of these younger guys, I thought we were pretty good, like Zane and them too. But this next one is just, I mean, like Tariq through 21 indoors as a collegiate sophomore. It's just it's crazy. It's things we're starting to see things that we couldn't even fathom in the past, right? Like that would just clearly be like, oh, that's just not doable and stuff. And now it's just becoming an everyday thing. So it's great. It's great to see. I wish we did more for our sport to make it more accessible and viewable, and so people could see how crazy these things are. But for the most part, people just don't care because they don't know what's really going on. But for people like ourselves who knew or know what's going on, it's otherworldly, I'd say. So I think it's really good for the sport for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I was saying, when you look at someone like Jackson Cantwell being 15 years old throwing a 12-pound
Oh
shot
yeah,
72
didn't
feet.
even.
Like,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I forgot completely that you mentioned him too. That kid is 15 years old to throw 72 and
yeah.
205.
Yeah, and he
Oh
benches
my,
well over 400.
like that. Well, I mean, your dad's Christian, right?
Yeah.
Christian Cantwell. I don't know if you. I know some personal stories about Christian Cantwell, and if anybody knows Christian Cantwell at all, that just makes sense. Like that guy's stock. Come on, that kid was bound to throw really far. Even his mother's a freak athlete. I think she was a thrower or something like that as well. But I mean, what he's doing is just like that needs to be studied scientifically. Yeah.
I remember I watched this documentary a while ago with Adam Nelson, Reese Hoffa, and Cantwell, and there was videos of Cantwell like lifting in it, and the stuff he's doing is just some of the craziest lifts I've seen like on video for
Yeah.
like that time. And
Yeah.
like the
Well, he's
2000s
done stuff
throwers.
crazy like throwing wise too.
Oh
Like
yeah.
my coach used to be Ryan Whiting, and Ryan Whiting was in the same era basically as those guys. Ryan came in towards the tail end, or not the tail end, but like probably the latter half of their careers. I'd say their dominance, that thruple of Nelson, Cantwell, and Hoffa. But Ryan, you always this is kind of like this is when I think about Free Cantwell. I'll tell you guys this quick story. They're at the 2012 Olympics. Ryan, Hoffa, and Cantwell, and they're throwing in the practice ring like the day before, I believe. And Christian's on fire, like 22 or 2180, 22, 2230. Like it starts throwing just nuclear the day before. Which at that time in 2012, the Olympic standard was 20 meters. So to throw 22 it was nuclear. So he's throwing massive, and those guys are throwing well too, Ryan and Reese and the other guys and everything there. And they're like, wow, Christian, you better save it for tomorrow. And Christian goes, yeah, it's not bad for an 18. He was throwing an 18, 22. Yeah, yeah,
Oh my
yeah. So
god.
Okay.
it was like
Wow.
it was that to me. When you think of Cantwell and his kid, like it's like that makes sense. Like that checks out completely. So that guy's always been that way. So like I said, his stock, his kin, I knew for a long time. Whenever his kid was going to get of age, he's going to be crazy. And the crazy thing is too, is I think I forget who told me this. I think it was Krauser told me that his kid wants to go play football. He didn't even want to go throw. So it's like he's just doing it in his off season, which is just insane. Because some of these kids work their entire lives to try to do it.
I say he
And
played basketball over the winter too. Like he didn't even do indoor
yeah,
track.
I'm sure he's probably. I mean, he's 6'8" or 9" or something like that. So I'm sure he's doing all of those sports. But yeah, I think he's gonna go play football somewhere for sure.
What do you think about the correlation from football to throwing or shot put in general?
I think that there's correlation to both. Like I think being a thrower makes you a better football player, and I think playing football makes you a better thrower. I think that there's correlation to whatever you do, right? So let's just say hypothetically I was a baseball professional, right? Let's say I played in the MLB. I think having a repertoire of sports underneath you makes you a better like athlete in your particular endeavor. Like I mean, when I was growing up, I did tons of sports, right? Like I wasn't just a one trick pony. Like I tell everybody, like I was on my middle school golf team. Like I did so many things. I played tennis and stuff, like all these different sports. And I think it's overall made me just a greater athlete, right? Like just in general. So I feel like you could throw me in a lot of different things and I'd be good. But especially in my particular endeavor, like shot putting, I think that doing all that stuff, like I said, having that sort of like background in doing so many different things and different movements created a greater proprioception and kinesthetic awareness of moving my body in space and all of that to a higher degree than most other people that were just maybe doing it one thing their whole life. So I think all of that has a tremendous correlation, right? So I think that like you see some of the top guys. Like I have a buddy Tristan Wirfs, who's an All-Pro right tackle for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That guy was an incredible not only shot putter but wrestler as well. He threw shot put at Iowa for a little while he was playing football. And there's a lot of guys, you look at some of these like top defensive linemen or offensive linemen or maybe even tight ends and stuff like that. They all were throwers too. So I think there's a massive correlation between the two, especially if you could do them at a high level, right? So just doing them isn't as much as being like, no, I was good at them too. So yeah, I agree completely with the notion that, especially with some of these coaches that are saying like, if you want to be good at one or the other, we've got to be good at other things too.
I say, touching on your like young athletic career, like you mentioned at some point that you didn't start throwing shot until pretty late in your high school career, and then ended up being quite good at it. Like, what was that experience like?
Yeah, I've mentioned this a few times when I talk about like my development. I started throwing shot put at 17. So I played baseball the majority of my life, and I played football from sixth grade on. Um, so I started playing baseball when I was 4, and I started playing soccer and all these other sports when I was young. I played basketball for a bit, and then I played football when I was about 12 or 13. So when I was in high school, I was just playing baseball and football at a high level because that's what I wanted to go do. I wanted to go play football somewhere and play baseball in the off season. And I had a coach in high school for baseball that was very kind of like we all kind of thought he was a little bit sketchy, right? So he ended up going to prison for stuff, and I don't really remember exactly what. But I just got to a point where before he went to prison, I was like, maybe I should try something else just in case something happens. And I had a buddy who played defensive line with me. I played offensive and defensive line when I was in high school, and he was like, "Hey, you should just try doing this thing I do in the off season. It's called shot put." And basically, the way he lured me in is he was like, we just lift all the time, and we have like team dinners, and you can eat whatever the hell you want, and you don't have to do summer conditioning. And I was like, "You got me there," because at that time I was gaining weight like crazy for football and stuff. So I was like, "Yeah, hell yeah, I don't have to run in the summertime, hell yeah." So jumped into it. First season I ever did, I threw from the glide, and we had like an indoor season because I'm from California, so there's not really like an indoor season, right? But we did an indoor season where we did like one meet. You qualify for the California Indoor State Championships, which is like a big deal. It's in this big convention center, and um, I threw 52.8, broke our school record, which was sweet. And then my outdoor season that year, I threw 60 feet two, and then my indoor season, my senior year, I threw 64, I believe, 64.1, and then I threw 69.7 1/4 as an outdoor senior, and then schools were like, "Hey, you can come here for free," and I was like, "What? You could do this for free? You can go to college for this?" So yeah, that was kind of how that I just kind of rushed into it. Like my first year of college at, because I went to the University of Florida first. Some people don't know that, but I went to the University of Florida first, and when I got there, I didn't know what I was doing. I had an understanding of the feel for it, but I like by no means was I like where I am now, where I know the ins and outs of it. I was still developing for sure, so it was kind of like a rush into it, especially because like my senior year, I kind of got threw up into that like I was top in the country and stuff. I was like, oh geez, all of a sudden I'm just I've got all these opportunities for it now, so it's pretty cool. But yeah, so it was a very rushed process. Once I started at 17, that first year going in my senior year, it was all of a sudden like, oh shoot, then like college recruitment and all that stuff, and so it just kind of blew up. And then that's ultimately what I decided to do because I was going to most schools and they're like, yeah, here's a full ride for track, and I was like, that's great. I could still play football or do something else if I want to. And coaches were like, no, you're not. And I was like, okay, so I guess I'm doing track. So yeah, yeah, that's kind of how that went for sure.
So tell us about sorry, Parker. Tell us about what happened at the University of Florida and why you moved to USC.
Yeah, so I went there initially because, like I said, I was top of the country, and that was like the Alabama for football for track, right? They had just won the indoor and outdoor national title, so I was like, oh gosh, to get a full ride to that school, it's like like I said, getting a full ride to Alabama for football, so it's like you got to take it. So I had actually been verbally committed to Texas because Ryan Krauser and those guys were at Texas, and I went on my visit there, and I was like, how could I turn this down? So I went on a visit there, verbally committed, but they were the only place that wasn't giving me a full. And I didn't tell anybody, but I went on my visit to Florida after my visit to Texas. And the coach there, Mike Holloway, who's still a dear friend when I see him on the track circuit, was just kind of like, hey, I'm not going to tell you what to do here, but this is, Florida, and we're giving you a full. And I was like, you're right. So I ended up just going there, and it was a great time. I love my parents live in Florida, so like I love Florida overall. Like Gainesville's a great place. I still have great friends. Like one of my best buds till they put me in the grave is one of my buddies, Nick Arubru, who went to Florida. He was on the national championship 4x4 relay teams and stuff. He's a really, really tremendous athlete, and I talk to him all the time. I just saw him recently when I was in Florida last, and yeah, so I loved it there. It just got to a point where me and the coach there, who, like I said, when I see him too, the throws coach, his name was Steve Lemke. When I see him, because I believe he coaches now at Virginia. When I see him around, still very cordial. He always congratulates me on being an Olympian. He's like, he always says the same thing. It's funny. He's always like, I'll be honest with you, I never thought it was going to happen. So it's funny because it's still very, like I said, friendly between us. But we just kind of had a difference of, not opinion, but we just had like a difference in what we thought was going to make me really good, right? So I wanted to go to college, and I was a young buck who was hungry all the time. So I wanted to be good right away. And he was like, no, let's take all these steps. Let's redshirt. Let's do all this stuff, and we'll make you really good your later years. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be good just my junior and senior year. I wanted to be really good right away. So, me, I was the heaviest I'd ever been when I went to University of Florida. I was 337 pounds. So I was really, really heavy and got just cock strong. Like, I just was really, really strong and really, really heavy. And ultimately, looking back on it, he was right. Not in the sense of making me good later, but like some of the other stuff, he wanted me to lose weight and all that stuff. So he was right. But I was, like I said, I was just a dumb, young 18-year-old who was just like, no, I want to be good right now. So I decided to leave when they decided to redshirt me indoor and out. So I decided to leave because I wanted to go somewhere that was like, I thought at the time that was like gonna, be more invested in my talents and stuff. And I ended up deciding to go to USC, obviously, and I had a really successful freshman year. And my time there was a little bit tumultuous and a little bit rocky, but I still have a good relationship with my coach, even though we didn't have a great relationship when I was in college. But I'm still very grateful for that time, even the time at Florida, because I think all of that made me to who I am now in the sense of being a man overall, right? Like maturity and a lot of different things, that having mindsets on even stuff outside of sports. So it was well needed that time at Florida, even though I didn't stay.
So, Parker, you can go. Sorry.
I was just following up on your college experience there. Like the age-old question: what's your one major piece of advice, or like, what's your message to young throwers looking to throw in college or beyond?
So that is all dictated on how old they are, right? Like if you're a high school senior, right, and you're doing or you're beginning recruitment, right, or let's say you've even done recruitment for a while, I completely think that the biggest key that you have to have doing this, going into college, is you have to find the program that suits you overall the best, right? Don't just go to a place because, you know, the coach is looked at as being really good, right? Like don't go to so and so because, well, the coach had a successful person years ago. Go there because you gel with the team. Go there because they have a major in the educational platform that you want to follow. Go there because you love the location of the school, right? Like the weather and everything like that. Go there because the way that they treat their athletes, right? The hospitality and everything that they have, facilities wise, like all of these different things you have to take into account. You can't just put it in there like, oh, I'm going there because it's a major Division I school, right? I knew kids that just I've coached kids that have legitimately, I tell this all the time because I didn't sign first to a school till July. So it was like a month before I had to go to school I signed. I tell kids all the time, you don't have to wait that long, but wait. Schools allocate money for people who sign late. And you've got to figure it out and figure out where you want to go and also let yourself develop completely into who you are, right? So let's say you're a 59-foot shot putter and you've got the available or you've got the talent to throw 65, right? Don't sign to the first big school that wants you, right? Like don't just immediately be like, oh, I'm just gonna go to so and so because it's down the road and I like it. No, wait. Find the place that suits you best. And I know it's the pot calling the kettle black sometimes because I left my school, I transferred. But looking back on it, that's what I would say, hindsight 2020, right? Find the complete full package that works for you as an athlete overall. And also, this is a huge thing, and people say this, and I know it's quite cliche, but be an overall student athlete too. Do well in class in high school. Don't be a bad student. You are never going to get to go anywhere if your grades are bad. So if you have grades, like even if they're not bad, if they're just okay. I went to high school with guys who were tremendous athletes that I thought that were going to be not just in track and other sports that would be professionals, and they could have been if they just didn't, or if they would have just buckled down in a lot of different things, right? Things that were important, and now they're not anything when it comes to athletics, or to be honest with you, much in their life, and it's unfortunate to see. but it all plays a part. Who you are as an athlete and as a student and as a man growing into that. Who you are as a man. It all plays a part to where you're going to go and what you choose to do later on, especially when it comes to college.
Now, on top of that, so like, what is like your best thoughts about like USC? Like, what made you pick USC, and like, what is like your favorite memory from there? Not only if it's not only just like as an athlete, but like the student side about it, life part. Like, just what drawed you to USC?
So mainly, a massive part of it was not only the historical aspect of their athletic program, but also just the degree, the weight of the degree. Right? You never know. Even when I was young, I still thought I wanted to be a professional, but you never know if you're ever going to be that. So you got to get to a point where you look at what am I going to be able to fall back on? And that's a huge thing, right? Because let's say I went to college and I didn't pan out as a shot putter. I need to have a degree and do well in my degree as well to be able to move on to more prolific things in my life. So the weight of the degree and the historical aspect of the athletic program was a major thing, but mainly, more than anything, it was the camaraderie of the alumni that really kind of brought me in, right? So when I went there, I met a ton of previous athletes because there was the meet that I went to. Because normally when you go on a track trip, you usually go to a meet and a football game and stuff like that. But the track trip that I went on, there was a meet going on, and there were alumni that had come to watch the meet, and I met a lot of them. Right, like I met Noah Bryant at the time, which I don't know if you guys know who that is. He was a 2007 World Championship team member in the men's shot put, and he was previously the USC school record holder in the shot put. So I met him, and it was really, really cool. And there was just a lot of like that Trojan family aspect that a lot of people, know about if you know anything about UFC. And all of that kind of just made me feel like that was home, right? It was Southern California too, mainly. So that was also a big thing too. The weather was phenomenal. It was where I grew up. So I just thought, with what had happened at Florida and stuff like that, it was like, let's just get back to my roots and who I am. And I think that was a major deciding point for sure when it came to UFC. And y'all, I mean, like, there's a lot of things that when you look at UFC, I mean, like the campus is beautiful and there's billions of dollars in endowment. Like it's an amazing thing. You get to walk around and there's beautiful women every single day you're walking around the campus. So that also played a role. There's so many different things, but I would say those three things, like specifically the Trojan alumni thing, was mainly the biggest reason to why I went there.
Sure. And following your college career, having to just be on your own almost, you'd still have teammates and coaches and whatnot, but how would you balance the real life versus pro athlete side of like your time? Just it being so time consuming, training, throwing, eating.
Yeah. I mean, when you're a pro thrower, it is all on you, and it is a full-time job, 25/8. It is not it's not even a 24/7. It's a 25/8 thing. It is a full-time job. Every single thing you do has to be kind of weighted towards what you were trying to accomplish, right? So I was lucky because where I went to school, we had a coach there. Her name is Carol Smith Gilbert. She is now the head coach at Georgia. She made it professional from the jump. So when I went there, it was a no nonsense program. A lot of us were going to be professionals at some point. So she wanted us to know what it felt like from the beginning. This is no matter where you go when it comes to a team aspect, this is an individual sport, and she treated it as such. So when I was there, I felt like I was training as an individual, right? I had good throwers, Connor McCullough, Olympian, Matt Katnick, who's now the school record holder there and multiple time All American. Like I had, and I'd be remiss to say some of the other. Tara Novi was her name. She was a discus thrower, multiple time All American. Alex Kolatz, she was a multiple time All American in the women's disc. I had some really, really tremendously special teammates. So we all were together, but we knew when it came down to it, it was you versus you. So that was where that mindset, like I told you earlier, that I have, that's where that was instilled. And I feel like that was something that I got that a lot of teams or a lot of kids didn't get because of the teams that they were on. A lot of kids were on teams where it was a good camaraderie and they kind of like fell on their teammates a bit, for support and things. And it's different, when you're a pro, you don't have that anymore. right? You don't have the training room. You don't have the nutrition station. You don't have all these things now. So now it's all on you, right? Sometimes you got to work a full-time job. Like my first full year as a pro, worked a full-time job. Like there's things you have to do to make it, right? It's the special ones that just leave college and they're big time. That's a very, very rare thing to have. So a lot of it was, like I said, where I'm at now was instilled in me, I should say, at an earlier age from Carroll, from my coach, and also Dan Lang, my throws coach as well, because they knew that it was going to be this way as a professional. So I grew into being an individual on a larger scale um, early on, and I'm very, very thankful for that. So I think that's what's helped me when I, made the transition into the professional stage, to be like, hey, even if I have nothing, I mean, like in 2022, I trained at Belmont University, and I had a guy there. His name is Joe Fry, still the coach there, and he was helping me out. And there were days it was so cold, I was just throwing on a concrete slab out at a park. Like I didn't need anything. I knew what I was, and I knew what I needed to do, and that's how you get it done. You get to a point where you're like, rain or shine, facility, no facility, gym or not, like I'll find a way. And so, I'm thankful to be able to have had that mindset early on, and it's allowed me to. I mean, like even now, like I can do it anywhere. You know what I mean? If I had like a random concrete slab in the middle of a beach and there was nobody around for miles, like I'd still get it done. I could figure out a way.
And
Yeah. Oh, sorry, you
oh,
go,
go
Devin.
ahead, sir.
No, you good.
Okay.
You're good, Devin.
So I was gonna say, there's a lot of high school athletes coming in now, like before you see right now. We all would love to go pro. Now we're not like complete, over the top athletes, but you know, like you said, you have to be 25-8 on it. What would you say for people like us who want to go, who love to go pro, but also, really need that extra fall back on? Like, what if we need these jobs, just to keep us on our feet? And even if we do want to, me personally, I want to throw hammer. I want to go even outside of school, even if I don't make it far, like in distance, I will keep doing it because I enjoy it at the end of the day. What do you
Mhm.
think about people like us who want to do that and be great at it? You think it's a hard jump, or is it risky, for future? Like, what if it doesn't work? What
I
would you
don't
say
think it's
about that?
risky. I don't think it's risky at all. Okay, so I am under the notion, and I've lived by this my whole life. I've had hundreds of kids ask me this question, right? I think everybody, no matter who you are, I don't care if you throw 40 feet with a 12 pound and you're trying to be a pro someday, go for it. Go for it. Why not, right? You're young once in your life. Why would you ever? I've said this many, many times, like this realistic thing. Like, I think that is such a dream killer. Like, who cares? Go for it, man. I would much rather live my life. Let's say hypothetically I was a 40-foot high school shot putter and I just never really amounted to much in high school, but I wanted to chase this dream of throwing the professional. I'd much rather be on the other side of it, right? As a 25-year-old or something like that, who just was like, you know what? I gave it everything I have. I'd much rather look at it knowing that I left no stone unturned rather than be like 40 years old and realize that I quit at 18 and I should have given it everything. Well, you have the rest of your life to be realistic. You have the rest of your life to work a 9 to 5 corporate gig in a cubicle. Why amount, or why keep yourself in such a small mindset, because you think it's what the rest of the world wants from you? Go for it. 100%. The three things that I would say when it comes to that is 100% you have to be patient. This is big for me, because as a young man I was impatient all the time. Wanted it now. I want it now. As an 18-year-old, I wanted to be throwing what I'm throwing now, and it just doesn't work that way. Be patient. It will come. The next thing I would say is just keep hammering the nail, right? Do not get discouraged. When it comes to training as a professional specifically, you are going to have more bad days than you are going to have good days. You you need to realize that the greater days on the other side of the horizon make all of the bad days worth it. So you've got to keep hammering the nail. Know that what you're doing will show. It will come through. I'm a perfect example of it, right? I left college as a 1970 shot putter who right now, if you're throwing 1970 on the circuit, you're not a professional. But I kept hammering the nail, and I knew who I was, and I had tons of people. I used to do meets at the Olympic Training Center my first year as a pro, and there were people on live feeds being like, "Why is Ponzio still throwing? He's a chump. He's a has-been. He never will be. I should quit." Blah blah blah. I used to have screenshots of him on my phone. Look at me now, right? You don't have to listen to anybody, right? Don't have anybody tell you where you need to go, right? Just keep hammering the nail. It's absolutely one of those things where you've got to just stay the course. And that's my last thing. That's the third thing, right? One foot in front of the other. Knowing that with what you're doing, hammering the nail and staying patient, knowing that even on your bad days, it's still a step forward, even if it's a tiny nail size step forward, right? Toenail size, like you're just making just a bit of a jump, just a hair of a jump. You're moving forward. When you look at good and bad days, right? Good days are a big step forward, right? Bad days can still be a step forward if you know why they're bad and you make them better the next time, right? For you, Devin, right? You're throwing hammer and you're like, oh man, I just had a terrible day. I don't know what I'm doing. Or I had no feel on the ball, everything like this. But you go, okay, I didn't have a feeling on the ball because my footwork was bad. And I know why my footwork was bad, right? Then it becomes a positive, right? Rather than it being a negative. Because you go, next time, I'm not going to do that, right? So now you're taking steps forward. So at that point, you're always growing, right? It may feel like because you're taking a dip in distance that you're going down, but it's not. That's where this exponential rise this way goes, right? Because you know what you need to do next time, and that's where you attack it. If you keep your mind in the right place, you'll always get to where you're trying to go. Always. Like I said, maybe it won't be Olympics, maybe it won't be top 10 in the world, maybe it won't be a medal, right? Maybe. There's a reason why only certain guys get it, right? Because there's only a limited amount of it. It's finite. But if you stay the course and you keep your mindset the right way in a mature manner that way, you'll always get to where you're trying to go, right? At least in that sort of vicinity.
Yeah. So, touching on a
Mind a bit, didn't I?
what's up? Yeah, that was really good.
We had to have some time to think there.
So touching on more of like a bit of like the character side of it, the day old question, the stash. What's like the significance behind the stash?
Honestly, I'll be honest with you, right? So I started growing this. I think it was 2019, and I've got like a baby face. So for me, I was just like, man, I just gotta I gotta mature a bit here. I gotta start to look my age. So the porn stash sort of scenario, right? Like the Tom Selleck special here was really only to try to get myself to look more mature than I already am, right? So it was mainly for an aesthetic sort of feel for myself. Now, once I did it, it just like took off, right? Because when I did it, I was starting to kind of grow in the sport. And once I had it, and people already kind of knew me as the goofball already. So once I had it, it became like my thing, right? Like I've got fanny packs now with a mustache on it, and it's like now it's my calling card, right? So everybody knows me as the guy with the stash. So it's become pretty cool. But that's the whole birth of it, was just that. It was just really just to be like, well, I'm just trying to look my age more. It wasn't like because I was like, oh, I think that'll be super funny. It was just, no, I'm just trying to try something new. And I never really fully grew out that's not true. In college, one time I let like all of my facial hair grow out, and it was really raggedy. So now I keep it kind of more trimmed and stuff. And I wanted to kind of specifically make it the mustache, especially being Italian. It's a very Italian thing. So I wanted to do that too.
How do you feel that that's helped you on the pro scene? Like after you started growing it out, is that what you would say made you different, and why people thought, hey, I like him?
Yeah, I would say that the charisma and personality more than anything was the main calling card, but that's a part of it, right? So it falls. That's a card that kind of files into that same sort of thing. So it all kind of falls in line. But yeah, I think that. I definitely know that in my big breakout year in 2022, like I know there were multiple meets that like paid me good money just to show up and be and to do what I did. Especially after that World Championship intro. I had plenty of meets that just wanted me to go and be a goofball. Like there were meet directors that would come up to me like during dinner when I got there and be like, we want something big tomorrow. So it was like, they knew that it was coming. So it was cool. And that's something that I have mentioned this on other podcasts that it isn't hard for me to do, right? Like I don't go to places and be like, okay, I've got to sit down and strategically fix it. It's like, no, I'm just being me. If you ask any of the guys that are on the circuit right now about Nick Ponzio sitting down, Nick Ponzio, I'm this way all the time. Like I should say not this way, that way all the time. Like I'll crack jokes if I'm in a good mood and stuff. I'll crack jokes all the time, and it doesn't always pay to just be serious, right? You look at some of these guys and it's like, man, I'm watching paint dry on the wall. I'm at a funeral, you know what I mean? So it's good to stay jovial and be like, hey, let's get this crowd involved, right? That's why I do the things I do, right?
Now that I want to know who is the driest and kind of like, the person, a thrower who throws, he's really good, but he's just no personality. Is there anyone like that in the sport? Because I feel like there's got to be someone
That shows no personality or that has no personality.
kind of both. Like just they show
Well,
up to
no,
the
there's
meet,
plenty
blank
of guys
page.
that there's plenty of guys that don't show any personality, right? Like Ryan Krause is a good friend of mine, but he
Yeah.
shows zero personality, and he's got a great personality. Like I love hanging out with Ryan because he's a funny guy. But those guys just don't do it, right? Like guys, it's their profession. So a lot of guys act like, oh, I'm all like you look at Joe. Joe's got like the
Yeah.
Emperor Palpatine the hood on during meets and stuff. He's like, don't talk. It's like, all right. So it's like some guys get into the and it works, right? They get into their kind of mode and it works. But for someone like me, I look at it as a more grandiose thing, right? Like it's not just me being a goofball. That's just my persona. It's also like, hey, I want people to come watch us too, right? I want to put asses in seats. So it's like, for me, there's a lot of complexity to it. But when it comes to, I'd have to think about that. When it comes to guys that just have no person, honestly, I would say on the circuit, the guy that like even outside of meets, in the meets, like when we're at dinners, when we're all hanging out, all the guys are hanging out. The guy that has no personality whatsoever, and it may just be because he doesn't speak English, but is Armin Sanancic from Serbia. That guy, most stonewalled guy I've ever seen in my life. Like it is well known that it's just like he just won't talk, like because he doesn't really speak English, but like I mean, Darlin Romani doesn't speak English either, but he'll at least hang out and be like, yeah, this. So he like kind of gets part of it, but like Armin, nothing, and that's very Eastern Bloc, right? That's very like that region of the world is like we don't make jokes. We don't. There's nothing. There's no joke about life. So yeah, I would say him. And it's funny. He's in the same. He's got the same agent as me and Peyton. So it's like we see that guy all the time. So it's very well known. Yeah.
You ever tried to crack a joke and then try to like wait for a reaction and he just kind of stares at you?
Well, the biggest thing is that we all try to do that, right? So that's the running thing. When you first get on the circuit, you've got to take your licks. So like when I first came on the circuit, Tom Walsh specifically, that guy just rang me something fierce. Like that guy, every single time I saw him was like cracking like stuff at me, short and everything like that, and I was fat, chubby, all this other stuff. And so I'm like, you just take it, right? You go, I don't really care. But when you really become a pro, you not only just take it, you give it back. And that's when you gain respect, right? So you get these guys who've just got no personality, who you just like, all right, let's try to get them to crack. And they get this stern, stonewall face, and then they don't crack back. And it's just like, all right, now you're just not a part of the group anymore. You just go. So yeah, we've tried, but it just doesn't. And it's probably, honestly, probably the language barrier, but my good buddy Filip Mahalovic, who's the Croatian guy, they speak essentially the same language. It's the dialects basically a little bit different, but it's the same sort of like root. It's kind of like Spanish and Italian. It's like the same Latin root. And even he's tried, because they room together a lot, and he's like, yeah, there's no getting to that guy at all. So yeah, there's you can only do so much.
Yeah. So I think our time has come to an end here. We really
Yeah, no worries
appreciate
at
you
all.
coming
Yeah,
on.
we've been doing this for a while, but yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like I had mentioned this earlier, man. I'm an open book. I'll talk to anybody for as long as they'd like. I don't mind discussing things, talking shop, everything like that. That's one of my favorite things to do. Like I said, especially with the next generation of guys like yourself.